Hey everybody, it's Drew here, and this will be the final video of my two-part series of the year-end content. This video will be about the best albums that I've heard this year. Before I get started though, I just wanted to clarify that I didn't have the most amount of time to listen to music this year due to language school, and plus I heard a lot more bad music this year than I heard good from Japan, so in reality, it doesn't add up to that much if I'm being honest. That's why this video I'll only have 5 albums instead of the usual 10, but hey, I got some honorable mentions for you because I had to fit those in. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? At number 5, this album comes from the absolute titans of Japanese music, and that is Bump of Chicken's Iris. This album was a much anticipated release of mine, and needless to say, as per usual, Bump of Chicken delivers. The thing I mostly love about Bump of Chicken is that with each track, you don't really 100% know what you're gonna get with them. One minute you're getting a dreamy J-rock track such as Nanairo, the next one is more of a soft power ballad such as Gravity, and then the next minute you're going down more of the J-pop route, mixed with some soft electronic synths in the production on Chromakopia. These songs mentioned are arguably my top 3 on this album. Although Strawberry is a pretty close fourth, but it's basically a Bump of Chicken version of a back number song, so take that as you will. The final thing that I like about this album is that while each song is above 4 minutes, I didn't come out of this album thinking any of them were remotely bad, and at worst, they were just decent, with the best being absolutely peak mainstream music. This album in particular makes me wish that Bump of Chicken had a more widespread audience in the West, and with this video I hope to spread that message. It's a fantastic album, a must recommend from me. At number 4, we're going to be exploring around the same genre of music, and this one is Higedan's Rejoice. After the immense perpetual mediocrity that Higedan delivered with their last album, Editorial, I honestly had no idea what the band had in store for the future. Thankfully, most of the singles that Higedan wound up releasing after Editorial were relatively good outside of Mixed Nuts, which is an absolute abomination of not only an anime opening, but as a song. I mean, my goodness, listen to that yourselves and you'll understand what I'm talking about. The good news is the singles after Mixed Nuts actually made me pretty hopeful for what the album had in store. And after listening to this album, Higedan really needed this bounce back album to work out, and it did. I believe that Rejoice is up there with Traveler in terms of quality, and it's also one of my favorite Higedan albums to date. It honestly might have usurped Traveler, I'm not gonna lie here. Now in the first half of this album, you might not get that impression. There's a couple of good tracks on it. I will say the first half does contain Soul Soup, which is my personal favorite from this album. Soul Soup is basically more of a bombastic version of Higedan's smash hit No Doubt, which was already a song that I liked. After that, the only other notable one that I should talk about is Get Back to Jinsei. But once the second half of that album starts after the I'm Home interlude, I mean, I gotta tell you, the album just takes off to a whole new level because there is a consecutive string of songs that are absolutely amazing. And coming from me, you know the second half of this album is amazing when the biggest hit from the record, Subtitle, is one of the weaker cuts from the second half. Side note, why wasn't the album version of Anarchy used as the original single? I guarantee you that song would not flop if that was just used as the lead-off single instead. Just saying here. That version of Anarchy went from a borderline mediocre song to a great song. However, there is one specific song from this record that has been on my mind ever since the release of that single, and that is Chessboard. Chessboard is easily up there with Soul Soup in terms of quality, and I can argue this is Higedan's anthem from this album. It's genuinely that good. However, I don't understand why the label and the management completely mismanaged how great this song could have been and how successful it could have been on Billboard. I mean, treating it like a promotional single might not have been the best strategy. I mean, you could have used the same promotional tactics that you did with Mixed Nuts. Just saying here, it probably would have been a smash hit. And Chessboard 100% should have gotten that push. It rightfully deserves so, and the fact that it didn't was an absolute crime against humanity. At number 3, I'm going to talk about an album that I theoretically should have hated, but I actually wound up enjoying it a ton instead. And it's the album that thoroughly surprised me the most, that being TASTA's Grand Pop. This album was my first exposure to this group outside of other American YouTubers who talked about them as well. and especially about how great their music is. The thing I like the most about this album is despite TASTA being more of a hyperpop group, the versatility they display on this album is why I have it this high. For example, on Byunji, which is more of a fusion of hyperpop and EDM, it has a good amount of funk elements integrated into the mix as well. And it honestly leads to a pretty fun listen. The next highlight of this album being BBM, which is basically a Vocaloid track as it features Pinocchio P, which, hey, that's a name I recognize. And after listening to BBM, it just shows that Pinocchio P and TASTA were a match made in heaven, and the fact they haven't collaborated sooner confuses me. Another element of this album that I forgot to mention is that there's plenty of moments where they're just flat out meme worthy. On BBM, they use that stereotypical doink sound, which honestly almost made me chuckle. And then on 10A Life, there's that. And then on 10A Life, there's that. And then on 10A Life, there's that. The final thing was that TASTA was able to make Tatsuya Kitani, out of all people, sound remotely interested in what they're doing. The track Suburban that he's on is easily the best vocal performance that I've heard from him thus far. And it makes me wonder if he just did the Jujutsu Kaisen opening Ao no Sumika for the money and nothing more. Also, the funny thing about Suburban is that they actually incorporate some drill production into it on the bridge, and it's honestly a seamless transition. I actually was surprised by it. It fits way better than it has any right to be. I'm excited to see what they have in store for the future. At number 2, this is easily the most obscure album on my list that I'm hoping this video will be able to spread their popularity more, and that is Game Center and Future Brothers' Enter the Future. This album doesn't really leave me a whole lot to say other than just go experience this album for yourself. Trust me, you'll like it. While I raved about TASTA for being versatile, this band absolutely takes that versatility to a whole nother level. Practically to the stratosphere. It's that high. The thing that I like about this album is that this album in particular doesn't have a specific genre that Game Center and Future Brothers stick to, as this album more so integrates what they see fit. A decent portion of this album is basically a fusion of jazz and rap, which makes for some of the most pleasant and chill moments on this entire album. The best thing that I discovered about this album is that it's the perfect album for background music, especially when I was studying Japanese, and as someone who has actual severe ADHD, it was much needed for the amount of distractions that I did not have. This almost became my album of the year, until I decided I discovered something very recently. But before all that, let's go over some of our honorable mentions this time, and yes, they will be in the same order as the last video. So without further ado, we're once again going to start over with the American albums. The first one being Zach Bryan's The Great American Bar Scene, and Luke Combs' Father and Sons, for being the two albums to keep my appreciation and sanity for the genre of country music. Considering we have artists like Kane Brown and Morgan Wallen festering up like Whiskey Whiskey and Miles on It, and that's even if you consider those country songs. I guarantee you that Billboard did, considering they didn't give Lil Nas X the same treatment with Old Town Road. Typical Billboard L, am I right? The next one is JPEGMAFIA's I Lay Down My Life For You, which 100% confirms to me that he is one of the craziest sons of in the game. And I also wish that Don't Rely on Other Men charted because it was considerably better than anything that Kanye West put out in his Vultures project, and it also is a vintage Kanye song in of that. People, you got iPhones and it's only an hour of your time. It won't kill you to listen to something outside of rap caviar. Just saying here. Continuing down the genre of hip-hop is Tyler the Creator's Chromakopia, which in my opinion is easily Tyler's best album since Igor, and I will forever appreciate him on Sticky, making Sexy Red and modern-day Lil Wayne sound passable. I don't know how he managed to do that, but I tip my cap to you. The final hip-hop record, and the second to last one on this honorable mentions list, is Kendrick Lamar's GNX. After he completely left Drake in shambles after the beef, he decides to drop this masterpiece towards the end of the year. And pretty much the entire album is fantastic in its own right outside of the title track, which is actually kind of fascinating in its own way. Easily my favorite hip-hop record from this year, and I cannot wait to see what Kendrick Lamar has in store for the Super Bowl performance. It'll be lit, I guarantee that. It's also well-deserved from one of hip-hop's GOATs. It's about time he started getting recognized on a more national stage. and the last of the American albums being Porter Robinson's Smile. It's tough to top Nurture in terms of quality and vision, but it's as clear as day Porter Robinson must have learned how to play the guitar, as it has opened more doors in terms of creativity within his music. These are his words, not mine. I heard it on a live stream before. Also, another disagreement that I have with Anthony Fantano is that he considers Perfect Pinterest Garden to be the worst off this album. Respectfully, I think it's one of the best on the album actually, and the worst belongs to Year of the Cup. I don't know what he was trying to cook with that, I'm gonna be honest. Speaking of Perfect Pinterest Garden, it's better than anything Machine Gun Kelly and Trippie Redd put out on a genre sad boy. You know what, now that I think about it, I probably should have added that on my dishonorable mentions list. Now for the 3 Japanese albums that I'm going to start off with the first one being Eve's Underblue. This album continues to prove why Eve is one of the best mainstream J-rock acts in the current era. The only small nitpick that I have about this album is that a lot of the songs are relatively the same. The only difference is it's not mindless slop like anything YOASOBI has put out past Yoru ni Kakeru. Also, Teenage Blue is easily the best on this album, because not only is it from my favorite anime, Ao no Hako, it's also the best song lyrically from this album. The next album is Saber Tiger's Eliminated. There's this one band that's one of the best-selling heavy metal bands of all time. You might have heard of the name. It's called Iron Maiden. Eliminated is basically the Japanese version of that. I don't think I need to explain that any further. It's a fantastic album. And the final one being an instrumental, that being Joe Hisaishi's soundtrack for the Silent Love film. Joe Hisaishi is easily my favorite instrumental artist to ever grace planet Earth. I was blown away from the Spirited Away soundtrack from the first time that I watched that film when I was 14 years old on like 23 movies on my Fire Stick back in the day. And the Spirited Away film was easily one of the most beautiful soundtracks that I have ever heard in my life. And despite me not watching the Silent Love movie, it doesn't even matter. The songs are still beautiful. It's Joe Hisaishi. Do I need to go into any further detail other than that? It's an absolute masterpiece. Check it out. Please do. What I consider to be the best album of the year are my 2 recipes for success. That combining anime and music. Because it's double the entertainment, and to be fair, I'm a weeb at heart. I wouldn't even have considered moving to Japan if it wasn't for my appreciation of the culture. It's also after watching this anime that I actually wound up developing a deep appreciation for not only its music, but the actual anime itself. I've watched a lot of music-related anime, from K-On! To more of the idol culture side of things, as in Love Live, to as recently as Bocchi the Rock, but this one is easily my favorite that I've heard so far, and it is also the only anime-related music that I actually wound up purchasing tickets to go to a concert for. Yeah, oddly enough, that's how Japan works, and sadly I didn't wind up getting them. However, I'm hopeful in the future that they do host a concert near Tokyo that I will be able to actually get those tickets. All I know is I'll be entering the lottery, that's all I'm saying. I'm that determined, trust me. The album being from girls band Cry, Togenashi Togeari's self-titled album, Togenashi. This will be my longest tangent yet, so strap in, grab some popcorn, do what you gotta do to keep yourself entertained because you're gonna need it, trust me. Because I'm about to explain as to why not only this is peak music, but peak anime. And there are minor spoilers for this, so keep that in mind as before you watch it. Because I'm about to explain why this is not only peak music, but peak anime as well. There are minor spoilers for the anime, however, I won't spoil it enough to where it'll completely ruin your experience of watching it, because I do actually want you to watch Girls Band Cry. It's genuinely that good. The first reason as to why I enjoy Girls Band Cry is the story. It's about the lead singer of the group, that being Nina, who is a high school dropout and is on the way to Tokyo to pursue her dream of being in a band. And not only just being in a band, but having a successful band as well. The move to Tokyo, however, was pretty much to the parents' dismay. But Nina just said it and went anyways. This anime really focuses on your decisions and how those decisions lead to things. And they especially lead things that you have to live by. For example, I'll use myself. The first time I ever visited Japan was after I graduated high school, and it was truly the greatest vacation that I've ever been on, and I've traveled a lot, trust me. And after I left the country for the first time to come back to America, and when I started college, I just had this deep desire to go back and start a life there. Fast forward about 5 years, I graduated college with a degree in business and sports management, and I didn't really have much of a direction that I wanted to pursue after graduation. This was until I talked to my mother's best friend at the time, who I actually talked about my passion for Japanese culture before, suggesting to me that I should actually move to Japan. The only difference is, compared to Girls Band Cry, my mom actually agreed with the decision for me to do that. And that one conversation as to why I am in Japan now and why I'm going to language school, and it's all thanks to her for giving me the idea. Here's the thing though, moving to a new country, it is not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some big cons with it as well. The first half or year or so when I was in Japan, I was just totally lost, especially when half the time you're in class and you're hearing all these older people speak the language perfectly to a T, and then there's me not even be able to comprehend what sensei is saying half the time. And the only reason why the students are able to understand sensei more is because they studied the language longer than me. Yet somehow I wound up in the same level as them. So despite me having some regrets about my prior studying tactics before getting to Japan, it's the decision that I have to live on. I was lackadaisical in certain areas of it. I probably should have practiced speaking more before I got here. It's how things work. That's arguably my biggest regret, and I have plenty more, just like everybody else in the world. But there's also a lot of things where I can look back on and say that I did a great job with. And that's what Girls Band Cry perfectly represents. It represents the struggle of life in pursuing your goals, which is a lot to handle. For a better explanation that somewhat spoils the anime, you can just watch any of the video essays that are on YouTube currently. Personally, my favorite one is from Red Joker. I'll link that one down in the description for y'all. Now, after I stated my example, and for those who have watched the anime, you can understand why this album is peak music. And it's up there with Yonezu Kenshi's Yankee for being my favorite Japanese album of all time. I'm not even exaggerating, it's all-time greatness material. Speaking of the music, I should probably talk about that before I bore all of you to death. This album feels like a storybook of the internal feelings the characters are displaying, and they're just completely spilling out to you, which makes this album incredibly relatable for someone who has went through any sort of struggle. I can raise my hand here, everybody should be as well. Some critiques that I've heard online about this album are that the album is generally just overproduced, and my rebuttal be, motherfucker, do you like music? Do you like stories? Do you like authenticity? Do you like the fact that emptiness and catharsis is basically a climax of this entire album? I just genuinely don't understand why anyone dislikes this. This album is also very lyrically detailed in ways that I honestly did not expect to. But even if you don't understand the language or decide to translate the lyrics, the energy Nina gives off already displays how great this album is. Speaking of Nina, I should have said this earlier, but holy shit, what a vocalist she is. Although Subaru is best girl, I will not hear any objections to that. If I were to go on any longer with this video would be an hour long, so I'm just gonna cut it off here. Togenashi Togeari's Togenashi from Girls Band Cry is what I consider to be the best Japanese album of 2024. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to subscribe as it's greatly appreciated. Not promising this, but I will work on another video at some point. I'm hopeful that after this upload, I'm willing to get it out in another day or two. I'll have to see how things go, but I'll update you on my community tab and my Twitter page for that to happen. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Drew from Drew Reviews Music, and I'm excited to see what 2025 has in store. Peace out, everybody. I don't know if you see that shaking here. That is not me. That is an earthquake. Very minor one, but an earthquake. Okay, I'm just gonna wait for... This is still going on. Like, what the f***? Like, what the f***? Can this stop, please? I'm trying to record a video.